So about 4 years ago, I set out on this mission. I wanted to know what made a good story. Because you all know you've had that experience, right, of a good story and a bad story. And some really, really bad stories. You know that experience where you sit in a movie theater and the credits roll and the lights come up and you just sit there and the story sinks into you. And then that experience where you finish a movie and you think, why did you waste my time with this horrible movie? Where you want to call up the director and just yell at him. Or a book, too, where you finish a book and you get to the end and you think, wow, I'm just going to start back over and read this again. Or that experience where you have a book and you think, what the hell? And you just want to throw it across the room, right? So what's happening? Why are there amazing stories and why are there really, really, really bad stories? What makes the difference? When I get into something, I kind of really have this obsessive way of getting really, really, really into it. And as I set out on this new mission, I just really read everything I could about storytelling. I read good stories, I read bad stories, and thought about why they were good or bad. I watched movies about movies, and really just kind of obsessed over this for quite a long period of time. And the conclusion I came to, good stories were stories that engaged audiences, were with universal themes. They're stories we all could relate to. So I kind of have this confession to make. The reason I went on this mission was a very personal one. I was at this point in my life where I was ready for a new career. You see, right out of college, I was a software engineer and spent about 8 years just doing this, sitting in front of a computer. And I liked it for a while, but then I got to a point where I thought, geez, I don't want to sit all day. So that's when I became a yoga teacher, and I spent about 10 years teaching yoga. And that I was still digging. I was having a lot of fun with that, but I felt like I needed a new challenge in my life. And so that's when I decided, well, you know, watching movies are fun, so making movies would probably be even more fun, right? In the last 4 years of my life, since I went out on this mission, I've been involved in three big projects. The first one was a documentary film called The Cheer Ambassadors. The Cheer Ambassadors, it tells the story of Thailand's national cheerleading team, which a lot of you probably didn't even know existed. And at the time, I didn't really know what cheerleading was when I heard this story. But they were this group of kids who had pretty much no support, no training. What they had was a complete and absolute love of Western competitive cheerleading. And we had archival footage that went back about 10 years that watched kids training on concrete, getting better. Then we followed this team to the U.S. when they went to compete in the World Cheerleading Championships, which if you don't know, gets like 10,000 spectators. There's teams from 100 different countries that go to compete. And here's these little, like, short Thai kids bringing home medals. These kids who made the audience stand up, 10,000 people stand up yelling, Thailand, Thailand, Thailand. So this was our first story. But when we made this movie, people told us to it's a niche story, it's about cheerleading, and you've got to appeal to a niche market if you're going to be successful. And I said, no, because it's not a story about cheerleading. It's a story about having a dream and following through with it. It's a story about giving up everything and pushing to follow through on your dream, even if it's just this weird, crazy dream that nobody else believes in. That's what the film was about. It was a film about friendship between kids athletes on a team, friendship between people of different countries as they come together. This is what the film was about. Cheerleading was just like extra. When the movie toured, it showed in festivals in about 10 countries. It showed in theaters in Bangkok. It showed here in the Doc Arts Film Festival about 2 years ago. Thay, who produced the film and was also a former cheerleader, he said this to me. He goes, everybody who watches this movie becomes a cultural ambassador for Thailand. And it kind of sunk in with me. He goes, when we were cheerleaders, we could go to a couple of different countries and a couple of different places and show people what we could do, and people were always really impressed with what we could do. But this movie, it travels around the world. It goes places we could never go, and it shows people what we could do. As I thought about the quote, I thought, the reason people become cultural ambassadors isn't because they love cheerleading. It's because they connect with the mission. They connect with the heart that these kids had. Following up on that, we did a movie. It was made, it was broken into 5 parts and showed on TV with TEDxChiangMai called Ten Su Chai, D-Dance Dreams. The film used it. There was a pop concert that happened last year, Hok Song Sip Sam, and we used this pop concert to give us a story arc of of the film, but that was just maybe 10% of the film. The film was really about the backup dancers. These people who are always dancing next to the stars. You know, you've got Madonna here, and then you've got the people next to them, right? So this is what it was about. It was about these people who are always next to the stars. These people who have this career that a lot of Thais think isn't really a very stable career, but yet they still put 15 hours a day in it. These people who are on the stage sweating sweating their butts off and really working hard, putting in everything in for the audience, but yet the audience often just looks past them to look at the performing star. This is what the film was about. It was not about dance. And I think that's why we connected with so many people too. You know, we knew dancers and people who like dance would like the film, and that was a great niche audience that definitely would come and, you know, would pay attention to the movie. But we thought more about were people who were working in an office, who always had some crazy dream of doing something they really wanted to do. Or the kids who were studying some major in college that they knew the job prospects were lousy, but they really wanted to go forward with it. These were the people we thought about when making the movie, and I think that's why the film ended up being so successful. The dance stuff was, you know, like I said, extra. Following up on that, and this gets to what I've been doing this past year, so Thailand really, we had this new digital TV thing that happened, and it's been great because there's a lot of new opportunities to produce content. We went in and we talked to Thailat, who has this new digital TV station. They said, you know, we've got this slot open. We thought maybe we should do something about yoga or health or something. They said, well, and you know about yoga, so why don't you come up with an idea? And so we went back and we thought, well, sure, yoga's interesting, but it's, you know, and it would attract enough people if we sort of talked about yoga teachers or putting your legs behind your head. That was interesting. You know, it probably would draw people in for a little while, and we probably could get the show to run for a couple months, and that'd be the end of it. But we thought, maybe there's something more we can do with it. How do we get back to the universal themes and just sort of use yoga as something extra? All right, so here's where you get to watch a video.
ถ้าคุณเจอปัญหาเบื่อเครียดพอคนเราอายุมากขึ้นมันอ้วนดิฉันไม่ต้องการอ้วนแพ้อากาศตอนเช้าปวดท้องเวลามีรอบเดือนความรักแย่มากไม่แฮปปี้กับชีวิตเลยมีทางหลายทางให้เราเลือกมันใช่งานของเราหรือเปล่าเครียดเราสร้างมันมาว่ามันจะพังแล้วเซ็งเศร้าเบื่อโยคะช่วยคุณได้นิ่งสงบสบายมันไม่มีอะไรมากระทบเราเลยร่างกายสง่างามในขณะที่อายุ60เราไม่เคยต้องหามส่งโรงพยาบาลมันก็เป็นการหาบาลานซ์อะไรคือสิ่งที่เราทำได้อะไรคือสิ่งที่เราทำไม่ได้ถ้าเรารู้จักฝึกฝนอย่างถูกต้องไม่ท้อถอยมันก็ต้องทำได้เรารักตัวเองมากขึ้นเจอความรักดีๆเป็นคนที่โพสิทีฟเหมือนกันเราไม่ได้รู้สึกว่ามันเป็นความเชื่อมันคือแฟกต์ฝึกโยคะมีความสุขมากๆเดินออกมาก็เหมือนขึ้นสวรรค์โยคะนามัสเต
Sure, there's some pictures at the end that are sort of fun, people doing stuff with their body, but that's not what it's about. It's about, you know, someone talked about earlier, being stuck in Bangkok's awful traffic, going through a bad breakup, fears of getting old, dealing with chronic illnesses. We picked out things that everybody's dealt with or fears dealing with, and we said, hey, let's make our show about this, and then just sort of show how people have used yoga to get through these problems. And I think it's why the show's been so successful. We did 13 episodes, 13 half hours, and it was just extended recently for 13 more. When I was doing my study, my kind of in-depth study of what makes a good story, I thought back to my childhood, and I thought about, you know, stories that stuck with me. They must be good if I remembered them, and not Ishtar, which I just remember sucked, but I don't really remember much about it. I thought about two films that really I enjoyed a lot as a child, Field of Dreams and Rocky. And I want to tell you why I enjoyed them, and it wasn't because they were great films, which they were great films, and it wasn't that as a gay high school kid I could secretly look at Sylvester Stallone's muscles without my friends, knowing what I was really looking at. That wasn't why I liked the films. The films stood out in my mind because I hate sports. And especially in middle school, I hated watching sports. Like if my mom said, you want to do your homework or do you want to watch sports? I'd say, homework, right now, homework. Okay, I hated watching sports. But I loved these movies, right? Absolutely loved these movies. But it's because the movies weren't about baseball. The movies weren't about boxing. Movies were about having some crazy, wild dream that everyone said wasn't going to work, and you said, oh, it's going to work, and you followed through on it. Or Rocky, it's about coming up against adversity, which, we've all dealt with, right? These movies worked not because they were about sports or because they had attractive men in them. They worked because they were about they used universal themes to connect to the audience. As I was preparing for this speech, I came across two really interesting quotes. Judith Weston, who's a teacher of directors, she's worked with a lot of the Pixar directors and a lot of Hollywood directors. If you want believable performances, the acting needs to be emotionally spontaneous. Judith speaks from experience, she speaks from the heart. A second quote comes from a scientific standpoint. It was this study that was in Scientific American. The best stories captivate their audience, whose emotions can be inextricably tied to the story's characters. It doesn't say the best movies have explosions. It doesn't say the best movies have nudity. It says the best stories relate to their audience. The best performances are the ones where you open your emotions and the audience connects to the emotions through things we've all been through. So, right back to the beginning, connecting to your audience through universal themes. What are universal themes? Universal themes are themes anybody can relate to. They're stuff we've all been through. You know, at first, and I saw the schedule today, and I saw that I was at the end, I was worried you all would be tired or people would be leaving, which fortunately people haven't left. Or if you have, I can't see you. I think that the timing was actually quite good because I sat and listened to, 20 amazing talks, and I thought about, there was a talk about plastics, which, I don't care about plastics, but I thought the talk was really interesting. And there was talks about all these different things that, normally, like if I was flipping through my news feed online, if it came up, I just probably wouldn't even read that story. But I realized that I didn't relate, that wasn't, that I liked so many of the talks. It wasn't because it was about the main thing that the talk was about. It was about the speaker's passion, or it was about the universal themes that they brought out in that talk. Those are the things I connected to. So thank you, Martin, for putting me at the end. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening to my story. As you go out and tell stories to people, think about connecting to your audience. Think about the simplest, easiest thing that you can use to connect to them. Thank you.